World War II, humanity's darkest nightmare. 100 powerful historical photos are about to be revealed. Drop a one if you're ready to watch this video all the way through with me. At Kharkov, the Red Army launched a fierce counteroffensive, its tanks grinding through mud and fire, one of the bloodiest turning points before the tide of war finally began to shift. In Geneva, 1930, the League of Nations gathered with hope of lasting peace. Yet beneath the polished speeches, the seeds of another world war were already quietly taking root. At Stalag Luft 3, the infamous POW camp in 1944, more than 600 Allied airmen dug secret tunnels beneath the barracks, writing history's boldest chapter of defiance, the Great Escape. In July 1943, the city of Hamburg burned under Allied firestorms. Its skies turned crimson, its streets reduced to ash, a haunting monument to the cost of total war. In Fort Des Moines, Iowa, it was June 1942 when America's first female military recruits tested gas masks, unaware they were quietly rewriting what courage could look like in wartime. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa unleashed more than 3 million German troops against the Soviet Union, a colossal gamble that shattered the illusion of Nazi invincibility and began Hitler's long defeat. Between August 1942 and February 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad raged street by street, Soviet flags rising over ruins that marked the moment the Red Army stopped retreating and started winning. On the eve of Japan's surrender in August 1945, a desperate coup almost derailed peace in Tokyo, a final act of defiance from men unable to face defeat. Over the skies of Europe, more than 100,000 Allied bomber pilots perished, young men swallowed by clouds of fire, their courage etched forever among the stars they never came home to. If you like this video, press 1. If not, press 0. Let's see who's still with us. By late 1945, deep in the jungles of the Philippines, isolated Japanese soldiers refused to believe the war was over, living years in hiding long after surrender. By February 1945, American engineers fought knee-deep in the thawing snow of France, their rifles heavy and hearts heavier as the war crawled toward its brutal end. Somewhere on the Eastern Front, a nurse gently wrapped the wounds of a Soviet soldier, reminding the world that even in 1942's darkest hours, compassion still dared to exist. In Times Square, New York, August 1945, Alfred Eisenstadt's The Kiss turned relief into romance, a single embrace marking the end of war and the beginning of peace. Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox of Germany, carved his legend across the sands of North Africa, 1941 to 1942. His bold maneuvers at Tobruk and Gazala became symbols of tactical genius, even to those who fought against him. By 1940 in London, the Blitz raged for months as Nazi bombers turned night into flame. Yet beneath the rubble, defiance grew stronger than fear, and democracy endured. Freed Jewish survivors raised the flag of Israel above the camps, its blue and white threads symbolizing rebirth from ashes and a promise that silence would never again follow suffering. By spring 1945, trains loaded with American soldiers rolled home from Europe, while across the Pacific, their brothers still fought on, unaware the atomic dawn was approaching. Smash that one if you love these untold stories. Hit 0 if you think I need to chill with the facts. On the St. Louis Bridge in June 1940, France fought one of its most honorable last stands, proof that dignity could still exist in the face of inevitable defeat. When the Allies first bombed Berlin in 1940, the strike killed the city zoo's only elephant, a tragic footnote showing how even innocents couldn't escape the reach of war. At Vinnytsia, Ukraine, 1941, the camera froze humanity's darkest moment. A Nazi soldier executing the last Jew in town, while others stood by, numbed by obedience and fear. German panzers and infantry thundered across Europe, their Black Cross flags cutting through smoke and silence, symbols of terror that defined the grim machinery of World War II. In a field near Innsbruck, Austria, a downed U.S. jet rested in silence, the gleaming symbol of modern war now just twisted metal among the spring grass of 1945. Across the Manchurian plains in August 1945, the Red Army stormed through Japanese lines at Heihei and Harbin, ending an empire's dreams in just 9 days of lightning war. And through the wreckage rumbled American tanks, engines roaring toward Germany, symbols of liberation for some, and for others, the sound of a world ending so another could begin. Hitler's order came on September 1st, 1939, when German troops invaded Poland. This lightning strike in Warsaw marked the brutal ignition point of the global conflict. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, at Omaha Beach, Robert Capa captured chaos through his trembling lens, his blurred photos echoing the confusion and courage that defined that morning. Decades later, on a remote Philippine island, Hiru Onoda surrendered, his 1974 capitulation marking the final echo of World War II and the stubborn endurance of loyalty turned into tragedy. June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. More than 150,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches in a single dawn assault that forever changed the course of World War II. Under the Vichy regime, from 1940 to 1944, France's puppet government walked a thin line between submission and survival, until liberation exposed the full shame of collaboration. The fighter plane of Shigenori Nishikaichi malfunctioned after the Pearl Harbor attack, forcing him to crash land on a Hawaiian island, an ironic twist of fate that turned an enemy into a lone survivor. In May 1945, Red Army soldiers marched through Red Square carrying captured Nazi banners, forcing the world to witness fascism's humiliation beneath the same sky it once sought to conquer. Over the English Channel, squadrons of Heinkel, Ha-111 bombers darkened the skies during the Battle of Britain, 1940. their hum a chilling reminder that the war's outcome once hung in the balance above the clouds. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, orchestrated the historic D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. His calm resolve guided the largest amphibious assault in history, turning the tide toward liberation and victory. Amid the burnt jungle of Iwo Jima in March 1945, Marines crouched in silence. The island was hell itself, where victory demanded not glory, but endurance measured in heartbeats. In February 1945, atop Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima, 6 U.S. Marines raised the flag amid fire and ash, an image that outlived the war as a symbol of unity and sacrifice. By 1947 in Tokyo, 28 former Japanese officers faced justice before an international tribunal, proof that the world's conscience, though delayed, had finally found its voice. Serving on a German U-boat was basically the ultimate deep-sea adventure. Except no one really came back to tell the story. Type 1 in the comments to show you're still here. The war ended, but our curiosity hasn't. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, Tokyo stood next in line for atomic devastation, proof that the United States had planned for a third, unimaginable strike. The gates of Ebensee concentration camp opened in July 1945, revealing starved survivors, human skeletons who had endured experiments that mocked science and desecrated the very meaning of life. And at Dunkirk that same summer, over 338,000 Allied troops escaped across the Channel, saved not only by warships, but by the bravery of ordinary citizens who turned their fishing boats into miracles. On August 6, 1945, over Hiroshima, the atomic cloud rose like a ghost of civilization, its shadow reminding humanity that victory and annihilation can arrive in the same instant. During World War II, Japan's largest intelligence agency operated not in Asia, but in Mexico, quietly gathering information from across the Americas under neutral cover. In the aftermath of war, General Anton Dossler faced a firing squad, his 1945 execution marking a grim precedent that obeying orders would never again absolve a man of his crimes. And in one of history's cruelest turns, the first American soldier to die in the war was felled by Soviet fire. Proof that even among allies, tragedy often arrives before understanding. German tanks rolled through Paris in the summer of 1940, their black crosses glinting beneath the Arc de Triomphe, a victory that felt less like conquest and more like the death of Europe's soul. The years 1939 to 1941 saw Hitler's armies sweep across Europe, one border after another collapsing, each map redrawn with arrogance until resistance became inevitable. By August 6, 1945, Hiroshima lay in ruins, a city erased in seconds. 3 days later, Nagasaki followed, and humanity finally understood the unbearable weight of triumph. Victorious and exhausted, Soviet soldiers trudged home toward Moscow, their rifles slung low. Heroes of a broken continent, returning not to celebration, but to the haunting quiet of memory. At Nuremberg, August 1933, Hitler stood before the masses, mastering propaganda like a weapon, his rallies blending fanaticism and theater to forge obedience from desperation. More American soldiers died in aerial bombardments than in naval battles, proof that in World War II, the sky itself became the deadliest battlefield on Earth. Georgy Zhukov, the steel-hearted marshal of the Soviet Union, led his troops to glory at Stalingrad, 1943, and Berlin, 1945. A strategist whose relentless courage shattered the backbone of the Nazi war machine. American engineers worked frantically over the Neckar River, building a floating bridge under shell fire. Each plank laid between life and death as German artillery zeroed in from the opposite bank. Benito Mussolini, the self-proclaimed Duce of Italy, led his forces into North Africa in 1940, dreaming of a revived Roman Empire. But the dream ended in ruin at El Alamein, where Italian divisions broke under relentless Allied fire. On May 28, 1946, American forces executed Dr. Klaus Karl Schilling for malaria experiments on 1,500 inmates, justice for crimes that disguised murder as science. On June 6, 1944, Utah Beach, Normandy, American forces landed under heavy fire. Yet their success hinged on intelligence deception and surprise more than raw firepower. By 1941, the United States had produced over 3 million war machines, tanks, trucks, and jeeps rolling off assembly lines faster than any army could drive them. Adolf Hitler's nephew fought for the U.S. Navy. Imagine family reunions after that. Hey, Uncle, remember when you tried to take over the world? The Battle of Kursk, July-August 1943, fought on the vast plains of Western Russia, became the largest tank engagement in history, where Soviet defenses crushed Hitler's final hope of regaining the Eastern Front. Between 1939 and 1945, the German U-boats prowled the Atlantic like steel wolves, turning the ocean depths into the longest graveyard of World War II. In Tehran, 1943, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill sat at one table. 3 wary allies shaping the world's future while secretly planning the fall of Hitler's empire. During the Warsaw Ghetto Raid in 1943, the terrified boy with raised hands became an immortal face of innocence crushed by tyranny, proof that evil always fears the helpless. On September 11, 1945, emaciated American POWs were found in Japanese camps. silent reminders that for some, the war didn't end with victory, but with survival against unimaginable cruelty. Soviet soldiers, exhausted yet exultant, shared crusts of bread amid the ruins of Stalingrad, a bitter winter in 1943 that finally turned despair into defiance. When Soviet troops liberated Crimea in the spring of 1944, the Black Sea coast echoed with gunfire and relief, a long-awaited turning point born from years of retreat. In Paris, 1944, General Charles de Gaulle marched through liberated streets, greeted by crowds who saw in him not just a leader, but the restored spirit of a wounded France. The Battle of Stalingrad, where never give up meant never stop dying. Even the snow there probably remembers the screams. From Stalingrad to El Alamein, between 1942 and 1945, factories worked endlessly, forging weapons that fueled the deadliest battles ever fought on European and African soil. At Stalag Luft III, the infamous POW camp in 1944, more than 600 Allied airmen dug secret tunnels beneath the barracks, writing history's boldest chapter of defiance, the Great Escape. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa unleashed more than 3 million German troops against the Soviet Union, a colossal gamble that shattered the illusion of Nazi invincibility and began Hitler's long defeat. By late 1945, deep in the jungles of the Philippines, isolated Japanese soldiers refused to believe the war was over, living years in hiding long after surrender. In Times Square, New York, August 1945, Alfred Eisenstadt's The Kiss turned relief into romance, a single embrace marking the end of war and the beginning of peace. When the Allies first bombed Berlin in 1940, the strike killed the city zoo's only elephant, a tragic footnote showing how even innocents couldn't escape the reach of war. And through the wreckage rumbled American tanks, engines roaring toward Germany, symbols of liberation for some, and for others, the sound of a world ending so another could begin. Under the Vichy regime, from 1940 to 1944, France's puppet government walked a thin line between submission and survival, until liberation exposed the full shame of collaboration. In February 1945, atop Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima, 6 U.S. Marines raised the flag amid fire and ash, an image that outlived the war as a symbol of unity and sacrifice. And at Dunkirk that same summer, over 338,000 Allied troops escaped across the Channel, saved not only by warships, but by the bravery of ordinary citizens who turned their fishing boats into miracles. American engineers worked frantically over the Neckar River, building a floating bridge under shell fire. Each plank laid between life and death as German artillery zeroed in from the opposite bank.